Last time on Doctor Who, I may have forgotten to mention a few things. Number one, Captain Jack Harkness's actor. Let's just say he got into some trouble too, but hopefully he's over it and keeping his nose clean. Number two, one of the characters that the Doctor and Rose meet along the way for their journeys was an enigmatic figure called the Face of Bo. And he'll factor into future seasons, namely this coming one. Also, when the Time Lords and Daleks went to war with each other, things got so bad that the Doctor had to destroy both species in order to save the universe, leaving him the last of the Time Lords, and Earth the only planet he could call home. And finally, when Rose took the TARDIS Matrix into herself in order to destroy the Daleks once and for all and save the Doctor, she became an entity known as the Bad Wolf, which then scattered its name across time and space. Which is why the name keeps cropping up last season and this season. So now, with all that they've been through, let's see how things have changed for our intrepid time traveler and his human companion. First, they arrive a couple days before Christmas. The TARDIS comes in on autopilot because the Doctor is slightly out of it, suffering from post-regeneration trauma, probably because of how he regenerated. And the only thing anyone can think of doing is putting the Doctor to bed. So they put him in a borrowed robe, which has fruit in the pockets. File that little nugget away for later. And they let him get some rest. And unbeknownst to them, belch out regeneration energy that leaves orbit, actually. Unfortunately, this doesn't go unnoticed, and neither does a space probe that Britain launches to study Mars. Hopefully they won't run into ice warriors. Also, Harriet Jones has become Prime Minister, just like the Doctor predicted. And unfortunately, her tenure as Prime Minister does not go very well. It seems that some of the local Santas playing musical instruments, they give Rose the creeps when Mickey takes her to shop for Christmas whatnots. And eventually, they turn. Their instruments are actually weapons, and they come after her and Mickey like pilot fish going after a shark, because that's what they are, pilot fish. And when they attack, they use a Christmas tree that they've secretly smuggled into Jackie Tyler's apartment, and it nearly kills Jackie, Mickey, and Rose. But thankfully, the Doctor can force himself awake to sonic the tree to death and chase the robot Santas away. Yes, the robots. And unfortunately, he can only inform Team TARDIS that those Santas are harbingers of something bigger coming. And come it does. An asteroid that's actually a spaceship swallows the space probe from earlier, and then begins transmitting to Earth in an unknown language. And not even the TARDIS translation matrix is working, because the Doctor, who apparently is part of it, is out cold, and so it's offline. Luckily, Harriet Jones has connections to UNIT, formerly United Nations Intelligence Task Force. Now it's Unified Intelligence Task Force, because the real United Nations kind of didn't want to be associated with Doctor Who. What are they, stupid? I'd love to be associated with Doctor Who. Heck, I'd love to voice a Dalek. Anyway, heck, I'd even dress as a Sontaran if they'd let me. Although I'm too tall. Anywho, Unit picks up the transmission and manages to translate it somewhat. And unfortunately, it's not good. These aliens who use bone masks call themselves the Sycorax, and they view Earth as an exploitable resource, and that includes the people. They call us cattle. They want half of the population enslaved, or they'll kill a third of the population, which at the time was about 2 billion people. And they have a means to do it too. They cast some sort of spell or something, which causes a whole bunch of people to suddenly become hypnotized, so they walk to the edge of the nearest tall precipice with an intent to jump. And to top it all off, they take the scientist who created the probe, the current director of Unit, and Harriet Jones aboard their spacecraft to negotiate Earth's surrender. And while Harriet and the other two try to appeal to the better nature of the Sycorax, they have none. They use an energy whip to vaporize the flesh off both the scientist and the Unit director, leaving only bones. They're savages. Worse than Sontarans, maybe even worse than Daleks. Because Daleks just want to kill you. These guys just want to put you in chains and exploit your planet for all its resources. Luckily, when Rose tries to use the TARDIS's transmission equipment to listen in on what's going on, they pick up activity and assume she's responsible for the TARDIS, so they take her and the ship up to theirs. And this causes some tea that Jackie had left inside the TARDIS to spill onto some heated coils, causing a tea vapor. File that for later. While Rose tries to negotiate and use some of the stuff she's learned along the way about stuff like the Shadow Proclamation and such, the Sycorax see right through her. But miraculously, they start speaking English. At least, we start hearing English. And that can only mean one thing. Yes, Jackie's cup of tea actually brought the Doctor out of his stupor. And he is a little erratic. He casually talks to the Sycorax, casually talks to everybody, sort of verbally bounces back and forth between topics. He disarms the Sycorax quite easily. The whip doesn't affect him. And he also breaks one of their staffs, which, kind of a jerk move. Staffs are cool. I like staffs. I own several staffs. And then the Doctor, while chatting up the Sycorax, stumbles across their means of controlling the population. See, there was some blood aboard the space probe, A positive. And you guessed it, everyone who's A positive is now hypnotized. Something called blood control, which the Doctor hasn't seen for years because it's just glorified hypnosis. So, when he hits the big red button which commands everyone to commit suicide, they don't, because survival instinct is too strong, even for very advanced hypnosis. I doubt even the Master could get anyone to actually kill themselves. But after the Doctor tries to reason with the Sycorax leader, then he decides to just go for broke. He grabs a sword and challenges the Sycorax to a duel. Winner gets the planet. Loser leaves forever. And so they fight. And they fight. And they fight and they fight. Until the Doctor literally gets disarmed. Left hand chopped off. Or no, excuse me, right hand chopped off. But because he's still got all that energy coursing through him from his regeneration, he just regrows his hand. And, lucky for us, it's a fighting hand, as he calls it. And with a quick rearm from Rose, the Sycorax leader is vanquished. He's allowed to live. And the day is saved. Unfortunately, he's a sore loser and tries to literally stab the Doctor in the back, so with a very cold, no second chances, he throws one of his pocket fruits at a button, which causes the Sycorax leader to drop off the ship like a stone. Gotta wonder what happened to him. Or should I say, what happened to what was left of him. So, now leaderless and defeated, the Sycorax leave because, as the Doctor says, the Earth is defended. So all the surviving humans get teleported back to Earth, along with the TARDIS, and the day is saved. Except Torchwood, which Harriet Jones had called upon earlier, an establishment that was talked about but never seen in the previous season, says that they're ready for something. And when Harriet Jones gives the order, a pseudo Death Star laser comes shooting out of London, converging on the Sycorax ship and vaporizing it. And this cheeses off the Doctor to no end, because they were leaving. But they could potentially tell other people about Earth, because Earth is getting a lot more attention. And when Harriet found out that others could show up, she doesn't assume, oh, most of them will probably be peaceful. She assumes the worst. And because she assumed the worst, the Doctor, who's now a little bit more aggressive, decides that he's got to take her down, and does it with 6 little words spoken to her assistant. Don't you think she looks tired? Funny thing about a few casual words. Jeb Bush, when he was trying to get elected into an office, some time ago, SF Debris mentioned this. He said that at some point, Mr. Bush was called Low Energy Jeb, and that caused people to lose faith in him. He wasn't careful, he wasn't measured, he wasn't calm, he was Low Energy Jeb. So when the Doctor whispered those 6 words to the assistant, it sort of snowballed into Harriet Jones potentially being removed from office because of health issues, even though she insists that she's fine. And so, despite the victory being somewhat Pyrrhic, the day is saved this time. The Doctor gets his new outfit, a smart suit with a waistcoat, looking like a teacher on holiday. And so the season begins proper. The Doctor takes Rose to New Earth. See, after the old one was allowed to die, people got nostalgic, so they located a new place and set up shop. And on this new Earth, whose grass smells of apples, there's a special hospital where they can cure anything, and the staff are nuns who are nurses, and cats, like 6-foot-tall anthropomorphic cats who talk. And unfortunately, there is a double threat. Number one, as it turns out, Cassandra, the last human, the witchy trampoline, survived her encounter with the Ninth Doctor, somehow. Her brain and some of her skin was preserved by her partially human assistant, Chip. And she wants revenge on Rose. But also, she's come to investigate the other threat that's at this hospital. It seems there's a ward where there are very, very sick people crying out for attention, and yet the cat nun nurses treat them like storehouses. In fact, when one begs for help, they just have the poor guy incinerated. It's here that the Doctor once again meets the face of Bo and finds out that he's supposedly millions of years old, the last of his kind, and has some knowledge to impart right before he dies. Possibly to someone who's like him. Hint, hint. Meanwhile, Chip lures Chip lures Rose into the basement of the hospital where Cassandra is kept. And while Rose tries to evade a potential trap, she steps into one. And Cassandra leaves what's left of her body behind and takes over Rose's while her consciousness sleeps. Eventually hooking back up with the Doctor, while he starts checking out what might be a potential threat to the people at large. And eventually they find it. Turns out there are genetically created, or artificially created humans locked in the sub-basement of the hospital, infected with every disease. We're basically generating cures for what shouldn't be curable yet. Like this one really, really big guy who is slowly turning to stone. He's cured, but his cure isn't supposed to exist for another millennium. And the cat nun nurses are in on it. Except for one nurse who's called Novice Haim. She's reluctant to keep doing what they're doing, although the head nun nurse, cat lady, she's adamant that the humans they have in the underground area, they're brain dead, they're useless. And yet, when Cassandra, after she gets found out, releases the humans as a diversion, they all start shambling towards the nearest warm bodies because it seems their brains crave contact. They've been in isolation too long, so they're like zombies, but they can't help themselves. It's not their fault. Unfortunately, one touch infects basically anyone with what they've got, and so basically they're almost exactly like zombies, just a little more polite about it. Two of the complicit cat nun ladies get killed, and possibly some of the patients in the various wards. But luckily, the Doctor, who forces Cassandra out of Rose, who ends up going into him briefly, then back to Rose, and then into one of the plague carriers, which gives her a bit of a moral jolt, because she felt what was inside the mind of that poor wretch. The Doctor gets a brilliant idea to mix all the current cures into the decontamination system that's built into the elevators, and literally wash away the plague. And those who get doused in the anti-plague, when they touch the current plague carriers, they're cured too. So eventually, all of these new humans are restored to full life. And that's when the authorities finally step in. They arrest the cat nun ladies, including Novice Hayne. They set about caring for these new humans, finding homes for them. And they allow the doctor to talk with the face of Bo one more time, who says he's not dying yet, but when the doctor sees him again, he will be dying, and he'll have a message for him. Meanwhile, Cassandra is not allowed to stay in Rose. So she jumps into Chip, who's managed to survive this whole ordeal. He's only got a half-life, and he's fiercely loyal to Cassandra. So he's more than willing to get jumped into. But Cassandra has had a bit of a morality boost. And so rather than simply let her die, excuse me, the doctor gives her a gift. He sends her to one of the last nights she was truly happy, back when she was still fully human and at a party, so she can talk with her past self, give her a from-the-heart compliment, and die in her own arms, allowing a spark of decency to get fanned into a more sustainable flame when the seemingly superficial past Cassandra starts to feel empathy for the dying person. And so Cassandra gets a bit of a redemption arc. She's no longer a villain. She's just a lost soul who needed help. And with that, on to the next adventure. The doctor tries to take Rose to the 90s, only to end up in the 1890s, I believe. Or maybe it was the 1830s. Well, either way, they end up in Victorian times in Scotland and come across Queen Victoria herself, who's transporting a diamond to a house called Torchwood. There's that name again, Torchwood. The doctor gets to use David Tennant's Scottish accent for a while, and when they get there, things seem off. The master of the house, he practically begs the queen to move on, and the waitstaff, which consists of bald guys, not even maids, just guys, seem almost like jailers. And eventually we find out that the master of the house's dad was obsessed with building this telescope. Only it's got way too many focusing crystals. It's not a telescope per se, it's something else, but they don't know yet what it is. And eventually we find out that the house has been taken over by monks from a nearby abbey who have apparently studied Shaolin styles, because they easily walk through the house personnel and chain up all the women in the basement, including the wife of the housemaster. They knock out the guards that the queen brought with her, take their guns, and then take up positions outside the house, because they've brought in a package. A very odd-looking young man who ends up talking with Rose once she gets chained up. He recognizes there's something of the wolf in her. But while she's of the sun, he's of the moon. Yep, turns out those monks have access to a werewolf. And when the moon rises, he changes. Luckily, Rose manages to get the people to safety. And while some of the people in the house put up a good fight, they're no match for a werewolf, especially since they don't have silver. A lot of people get off-screen mauled to death. Basically, they use jump cuts and sound effects, which honestly is almost worse than actually seeing the carnage, because your imagination can conjure up so much more. Eventually, it's revealed that the queen has a special diamond that she's going to have recut, even though it looks perfect. It seems her husband was working with the dad of the housemaster to get the diamond just perfect. And then it clicks for the doctor. The telescope isn't a telescope, it's a light chamber. Originally, the house was a trap. Get the queen here, get the wolf to bite her, and so the spirit of the wolf would pass to her, and she'd be able to use Earth's fledgling industrial technology to start a galactic wolf empire. It seems that some time ago a meteorite, which actually was a spaceship, crashed, and a shapeshifter who utilizes lunar wavelengths to exist infects a person once a generation, and the monks decided to pledge their loyalty to it rather than Big G upstairs. So it's a mad dash to keep the queen safe and figure out a way to take out the werewolf, who thankfully was conditioned to withdraw from mistletoe. Not wolfsbane, because that would have been too obvious. So they managed to hold it off long enough, but the master of the house gets eaten. And the doctor realizes that with a few minor adjustments, he can combine the diamond with the telescope and use an overdose of moonlight to take the werewolf out for good. And just in time, too, because the werewolf busts into the room where they have the telescope and confronts the queen. Luckily, she doesn't seem to have gotten bit or scratched or anything before the doctor puts the plan into action and zaps the beast, who, upon reverting to human form, requests that he turn the beam up all the way and allow the guy to die with some dignity, to which the doctor obliges. So the day is saved. The lady of the house is in charge now. The queen actually knights both Rose and the doctor. Rose becomes a dame, the doctor becomes a knight, and then they both get banished, because the queen's not amused at their flippant attitude towards eldritch horrors. Also, she wasn't amused that the doctor and Rose had a bet going whether or not she could be persuaded to say, "We are not amused." Apparently that was a thing with her. Eventually it's revealed that it seems the queen got a little scratch on her wrist from a splinter when the door was destroyed in the last encounter. But the doctor warns her that if it is a bite or a scratch, then she could be in serious trouble. Although she assures him that it was just a scratch from the door. It wasn't. After the Doctor and Rose leave, speculating that the royal family in modern times are in fact werewolves because they're interested in hunting and all their activities are scheduled. The Queen convinces the lady of the house that the Torchwood building should be used to start a organization for combating eldritch horrors from the stars. And so we finally find out what Torchwood is. Apparently it was some sort of defense squad. Meanwhile, back in modern times, the Doctor and Rose get a call from Mickey about a school. It's been getting record test scores after this new headmaster and a math department show up. But there have also been disappearances. Children who won't be missed because technically they're orphans or for some other reason. They just vanish, never to be seen again. So, the Doctor sets himself up as a teacher in the physics department, and Rose sets herself up in the lunchroom serving fries. And she finds out that the kitchen staff are also weird. They use this strange oil that might be hazardous, to them at least, in order to fry the fries. Meanwhile, who should show up investigating things but Sarah Jane Smith? Yes, she is back. And eventually, everyone meets up. The Doctor reveals himself, and they have a bit of a reunion. Sarah Jane was a little put off that the Doctor didn't come for her, rather finding new companions. And Rose is a little bit threatened by Sarah's presence, although they warm up to each other, swapping stories about the Doctor, laughing at him. Eventually, it's revealed that there are these aliens who are utilizing various bits of DNA from those they conquer to improve themselves. Last time the Doctor saw them, they were humanoids with abnormally long necks. But now they're more like bat monsters. And they've been eating the children. Not to mention the various teachers who refuse to leave. And it's also revealed that the oil that they've been using comes from the aliens' homeworld, but they've changed themselves so much that said oil is toxic to them. Which is evident when one of the lunch ladies spills some on herself and blows up off screen. Meanwhile, the Doctor finds out that Sarah Jane still has K9 Mark III, who sadly has been offline for some time, but the Doctor gets him going like that. So he's there to help. And when he confronts the headmaster, played by Anthony Stewart Head, who makes an awesome hero and an awesome villain, it's revealed that the aliens are using the souped up brains of the children, using alien oil to make them cleverer, which has affected Rose too, to a degree, in order to find an equation that will allow them power over life itself. Kind of like the DC Universe's anti-life equation, but in reverse. And he tempts the Doctor into trying to help, because with that kind of power he could resurrect the Time Lords. And the doctor considers it, but then realizes no one should have that kind of power. So, with the help of K9's nose laser, the doctor hatches a plan to lure all the aliens into the kitchen, get all the children out of the school with the help of one student who isn't allowed to eat the fries. And so he's not under the aliens' thrall. And eventually douse the aliens with their own oil, which will cause them to blow up. Which K9 does, but that means he blows up too. So eventually the day is saved. Rose's extra cleverness sort of fades, but she's still got regular cleverness. Mickey decides he finally wants to go with the Doctor and Rose on adventures, and Sarah Jane finally gets the Doctor to say a proper goodbye, because she still hasn't quite forgiven him for dropping her off in the wrong part of Britain, like at the other end of Britain from her home. But as a sort of apology, turns out the Doctor rebuilt K9 Mark IV and downloaded his consciousness into a new body. So once again, Sarah Jane and K9 walk off into the sunset, but this won't be the last time we've seen them. Oh no. And so the Doctor, Rose, and Mickey travel to space, where they find an abandoned spaceship that seems to be utilizing human body parts to replace components. A pump replaced with a heart, a camera replaced with an eye. And we find out that there were 50 people on that ship. And they've all been harvested. And what's worse, the repair droids that are actually clockwork, literal clockwork, are still working to repair the ship. They need one more component, a primary computer. And so they've cranked up the ship's warp drive all the way and have opened tears in time in order to locate a French woman by the name of Madame de Pompadour. They want her brain to replace their computer for some reason. And what's worse, it's revealed that they're waiting for her to be 37, because that's how old the ship is. But why would they go after some French woman from pre-revolution France just because both she and the ship are 75? I mean, she was a remarkable woman. Even the Queen liked her. And when the Doctor tries to get some information from her via mind meld, she sees things in the Doctor's mind too. And this puts up a few red flags, and also entices the Doctor to want to take her on as a companion as well, which I'm sure Rose would love. But as the Doctor, Rose, and Mickey fight the Clockwork Men through various points in Madame de Pompadour's life, from childhood all the way to when she's 37, the Doctor decides to make a sacrifice. He's managed to close all but one doorway. Well, actually, the Clockwork Men closed the doorways in order to try to shut him out. And so they try to take Madame de Pompadour's head, only the Doctor does something drastic. He breaks through one of the doorways, which destroys all of them. And so, with their escape route cut off, there's no way of accomplishing their mission, so they allow themselves to wind down. And while the Doctor is resigned to staying in pre-revolution France, Madame de Pompadour reveals that she still has access to one portal, the slightly wonky version, or wonky portal that was in her fireplace from the start. Unfortunately, when the Doctor tries to get her to go through with him, so she can become a companion, they get separated again, and by the time he manages to get back, she's died in her early 40s from some illness. She gives the Doctor a letter saying goodbye, and with a look of dejectedness, he closes the fireplace portal and the flame goes out. Oh, what could have been. Still, he was able to meet a very, very interesting character who won't be forgotten, because it's revealed to the audience that the ship is the SS Madame de Pompadour. Turns out her memory lived on even into the far future. Meanwhile, on the way home, Team TARDIS ends up getting thrown from one dimension to another, where things are slightly different. Britain has a president, Zeppelins are still being used, and a guy who runs an industry called Cybus has decided to force humanity to evolve the way he wants. He's taking the homeless and putting their brains into metal shells. Yes, the Cybermen are back, only this time they're developing on Earth. They may have developed on Mondas as well, but maybe Mondas never existed in this new universe. And when the Cybus industry leader gets injured by one of his subordinates to try and assassinate him, his own creations turn on him, but not to kill him, but to keep him alive and turn him into a cyber leader, or a cyber controller. Meanwhile, Rose finds out her dad is still alive in this universe, still married to Jackie, they're rich, and Rose is a dog, like a little teacup poodle thing. And while she does get a chance to have a quick chat with her alt dad, when she talks to her alt mom, the woman reacts as if Rose just went to the bathroom in front of her. She's just a spoiled monster, worse than any modern celebrity. So when the Cybermen attack, the Doctor and Rose manage to save alternate Pete, Rose's dad, but Jackie gets taken and cyber converted. Yeah, no big loss there. She was a jerk. But alt Pete is devastated. Furthermore, the Cybus industry tech, which specializes in earbuds that download the internet directly into the brain, well, the cyber leader, as he's now called, utilizes that tech to control people and make them walk into cyber conversion chambers. And that's what happens in part 2 of this two-parter. Eventually, it's revealed that there is a rebel influence led by Ricky, the alternate version of Mickey, whose grandma, who died in the original reality, is still alive. Unfortunately, when they try to fight the Cybermen together, Ricky gets killed. And so, to honor his memory, Mickey takes up the mantle of rebel leader, working alongside a guy named Jack. Eventually, the Doctor finds out that if he can disrupt the emotional inhibitors in the Cybermen, their emotions will take over and destroy them, because the trauma of seeing what has become of them is fatal. And he can't save their lives, but he can at least release them. Unfortunately, the cyber controller is a stubborn jerk and tries to clamber up the ladder to the Zeppelin that they're escaping on. But with a quick application of the sonic screwdriver from Pete, Alt Pete, the cyber leader is incinerated. And yes, I'm going back and forth between leader and controller. Mickey decides to stay and be with his alternate grandma to help fight the Cybermen alongside Alt Pete. But Rose, she wants to go back with the Doctor. And so, after utilizing a tiny spark of life from the seemingly dead TARDIS, they just managed to get home, but it was a one-way trip. So that's it for Mickey. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Rose end up in the early 50s, just in time for the coronation of the now late Queen Elizabeth. Unfortunately, not everything is as it seems. There's a darkness that has corrupted this little village. And we look in on one family whose dad has somehow become a tyrant. He didn't always seem that way, but when something happens to the matriarch of the family, his mother-in-law, he turns dark for some reason, verbally abusing his wife and son, and insisting that the son not go to college, but rather join him in a factory. Meanwhile, there are an abnormally large amount of TVs in this particular village, with aerials that look disturbingly like bent X's. And with the way the man of the house we visit is acting, you can see a little bit of something you really don't want to see occurring at this house. Eventually, it's revealed that there is an energy-based being called the Wire who's enslaved a local TV salesman and forced him to sell extremely cheap TVs to everyone so she can use them to pull the electrical activity out of everyone's brain, leaving them literally faceless. That's what happened to the mother-in-law. Because the guy, the man of the house, ratted them out. Everyone. He fought fascism, and now he's become a fascist. Eventually his son stands up to him, and so does his wife, kicking him out. And the Doctor just barely manages to cobble together a workaround to thwart the Wire at the last second, because she's going to utilize the coronation of the Queen, which is being broadcast, to get millions of people's energy and manifest herself. Turns out she's a criminal who was executed but survived somehow. At first, the Doctor's cobbled together device shorts out, but thanks to the son, who is actually pretty good with machines, and that's why he wants to go to college, he manages to get it going, saving the day. And all the faceless people get saved, including the G-men who were taking the people away. Yeah, the Doctor wasn't exactly happy about that. Anyway, everyone celebrates the Queen's coronation. The Doctor convinces the boy to offer an olive branch to his father, because he's only got the one. And Doctor and Rose celebrate in style. Sadly, the wire killed her forced accomplice. She never intended for him to be freed of her, only done away with. But still, day saved. Then, the Doctor and Rose just barely managed to make it onto a space base, which is on a planetoid, which is somehow being kept from getting sucked into a black hole by some strange force. And they find out two things. Number one, the people that are on the space base are drilling towards the source of the energy, which could be harnessed for humanity's purposes. And number two, they're practicing slavery again. This time they've enslaved these people, the Ood. Squid-like beings with tentacle mouths and translators grafted directly into their faces. Those orb things. Who were actually inspired by the Sensorites from way back in the Hartnell era. They're very similar. And in a future episode, I will tell you why. Unfortunately, not everything is as it seems, because there's a language that the scientists discovered that can't be translated. Not even the TARDIS's Matrix can translate it. But eventually they find out what is in that core at the planet surface. Excuse me. They find out what is at the core of the planet. The literal devil. Yep. It seems in the time before time, some early superpowers came together and fought the actual devil, chaining it up in a planetoid and giving it the means to escape from its capture, I should say, but also the means to destroy itself. But when the Doctor manages to confront the creature, it's just a beast. The consciousness was actually transported to one of the humans. And after the Ood get taken over and start killing people, the survivors manage to escape on the rocket that they brought. And the idea of the devil gets this close to escaping. Luckily, the Doctor, who deactivates the energy keeping the planet from going into the black hole, believes in Rose, who also manages to get the possessed human sucked out of the rocket. And so the devil is literally crushed to death by a black hole. And, shock of shocks, the TARDIS, which was lost earlier, is found in the cavern. So the Doctor manages to save himself and one of the scientists who gets trapped with him. Unfortunately, the now freed Ood are lost. So, the Doctor swaps the scientist for Rose, and they go on their way. Because black holes don't really affect the TARDIS. So he tows the rocket to safety. It was starting to get sucked into the black hole. And so, showing an unusual amount of kindness for a slave race, the humans record honorable death for their human comrades and the Ood. And the Doctor and Rose go off, having literally fought the devil and won. After that, we meet a guy named Elton, who seems to have encountered the Doctor a few times in his life. Once when he was a kid, the Doctor just made himself comfortable in Elton's house. Then later, Elton was there when the Autons attacked. He was trapped in his house when the Sycorax spaceship blasted all the windows in London on its entrance into the atmosphere. And eventually, he hooks up with a young woman named Ursula and her group, which ultimately named themselves a silly name that doesn't really mean anything. Personally, I would have called them TARDIS Chasers. And they start studying the Doctor in their own way, using what little information they can glean from the internet that wasn't deleted when the Doctor messed with the internet to cover his tracks. But the thing is, eventually they start deviating from their studies, start talking about why they started this club, what they were looking for. Like one of the women lost her daughter to drug addiction. She might still be alive, but she's lost somewhere in London. Eventually they form a band who were pretty good. Then a guy named Kennedy shows up with Torchwood files and gets them back on track, sending Elton to look for Rose. And eventually he does find Jackie after a brief encounter with the Doctor and Rose when he went looking for them. But he didn't stick around to talk to them, which made Kennedy mad. But finding Jackie was a stroke of redemption. Funny thing is, when Elton tried to enact certain infiltration tactics that he was taught by Kennedy, it was Jackie that was basically doing all the talking. She's such a flirt. Eventually, she comes on to Elton, who tries to use his body to get information, but he's just not feeling it. He's in love with Ursula, and after Jackie gets a message from Rose, she's sort of lost the mood. So Elton tries to placate her with pizza as friends, but then she finds a picture of Rose in Elton's jacket while planning to put $10 in his coat for the pizza. And she's cheesed because while she may not be a full-on companion, she is loyal to Rose and, by association, the Doctor, and she'll protect both of them. So she tells Elton to hit the road, and that gives him a bit of an epiphany. What they're doing is wrong. The Doctor and Rose have a right to privacy. So, they tell Kennedy that he's got to keep going on his own. They're out. And he finally draws up the courage to ask Ursula on a date. And unfortunately, that's when Kennedy springs his trap. He's actually an alien, who Elton calls an Absorbaloft, and who later is revealed to be from the sister world of Raxacoricothalapatorius, because he looks kind of like a Sladine. Although he's actually not from Raxacoricothalapatorius. Like I said, he's from the sister world of Raxacoricothalapatorius. Clom. C-L-O-M. Clom. Because Doctor Who. Anyway, turns out Kennedy, aka the Absorbaloff, has been absorbing the members of the club one by one and lying about where they've been. Eventually he absorbs Ursula and intends to absorb Elton because he's a witness. Of course, then the Doctor and Rose show up because Rose is cheesed off that Elton broke Jackie's heart. Even though the Absorbaloff is right there. Turns out the reason he wants the Doctor, he wants to absorb him and take the TARDIS. Luckily, there's enough of Ursula and the group to sort of resist the Absorbaloff, giving Elton a window to grab a cane that Absorbaloff has been using this entire time, breaking it and causing the Absorbaloff to dissolve. But as a sort of apology for what he's been going through, the Doctor manages to save some of Ursula so she's a face in the paving stone. Yeah, that didn't translate well. So she's technically alive, possibly immortal, although some would argue that's not a good fate. And he's at least decent enough to tell Elton why he was at his house all those years ago, to stop a living shadow, but unfortunately not in time to save Elton's mom. That's the driving force behind Elton's quest. Figure out why his mom died. And so Elton and what's left of Ursula live happily ever after. Weird. After that, the Doctor and Rose head back to 2012 to observe the Olympic Games in London. Unfortunately, they come across an alien, basically a space jellyfish, who yearns for contact with others because its family numbers in the billions, and it is craving love and attention. So it sort of possessed the little girl and gave her the ability to trap people, including the Doctor, inside paper by just drawing their image. And so kids have been disappearing, even cats. At first she sends a scribble monster to attack Rose. Then after capturing the Doctor and the TARDIS, she draws a picture of her dead, abusive dad and tries to use it to fight Rose. And then she attempts to grab everyone in the world by drawing the whole world to appease this space jellyfish. But the Doctor manages to get enough of a message out to Rose to find the space jellyfish's spaceship, which is this little egg-shaped thing which was buried in the street, and throw it into the Olympic torch, which is passing by the neighborhood. Because not only does the pod need heat and light, it needs love and attention. And that torch ends up being a beacon. And eventually the Doctor is returned along with everyone else when the jellyfish leaves the girl and gets back in the pod. And the Doctor ends up carrying the Olympic torch all the way to the torch in order to allow the creature to leave Earth and rejoin its kind who were earlier dispersed by a solar flare. Now, the Doctor did carry the Olympic torch during the games, but it was Matt Smith, and he didn't light the brazier. So, SF Debris deemed this episode and the one before it as not really something worth checking out more than once. But, happily ever after, even though the Doctor ominously tells Rose that there's a storm coming. So when they get back to the present, a little before 2012, it's revealed that London and the whole of the world have been inhabited by ghosts. They show up like clockwork, and this piques the Doctor's interest. I mean, what are they? They can't actually be ghosts, can they? Can they? But at the same time, we find out that Torchwood, who has been busy little bees, is responsible for calling the ghosts forth. They're experimenting with some sort of puncture in reality. And they had to build a skyscraper in order to reach it. So, eventually, after the Doctor and Rose infiltrate Torchwood, and they find out that they've been attacking and confiscating aliens and their tech when they get too close to Earth. The space laser from earlier, that was Torchwood. And the head of the London division, Yvonne, is very, very proud and very, very smug. Then she reveals an obsidian-looking sphere called a void ship. Turns out that's what punctured reality. And these ghosts are bleeding through. Eventually, it's revealed that the ghosts are Cybermen. They've infiltrated the facility, and they turn the machine up all the way, thus opening the path for a complete invasion of Earth. Yes, the Cybermen are back, but so is Mickey and his merry band of rebels, including Pete and Jack. But the void ship wasn't of their making. Turns out there were Daleks in that ship. And not only Daleks, but a very special breed. 3 bronzes and a black. They have names, and they can imagine. They call themselves the Cult of Scarl, like a special forces division. And for the first time ever, Daleks and Cybermen meet. Sadly, not Cybermen from our reality, but Cybermen just the same. And at first, the Cybermen offer an olive branch, but the Daleks, being Daleks, turn it down. Luckily, for the Daleks at least, the cyber weapons can't penetrate their shields. But the Dalek weapons can penetrate the cyber shields. And they've brought some sort of Time Lord device called a Genesis Arc with them. And after Mickey gets forced to touch the thing and imparting some of his time travel energy, like Rose did with the last Dalek, it opens, revealing that it's a prison ship. Millions and millions of Daleks spill out and start taking out anyone they can see. Daleks, Cybermen, humans, anyone. Meanwhile, Yvonne gets press-ganged into the cyber forces because the Cybermen are in need of troops. And she chants that she did her job for Queen and Country as she walks into the cyber conversion chamber. We don't know why. Eventually, Mickey, Pete, Jackie, Rose, and the Doctor all hook up with the rebels to try to fight the Cybermen and the Daleks, which the Doctor knows how to beat because they've been through the void between worlds. They've got this residue on them, similar to what time travelers get when they travel. So, by reopening the breach and reversing the polarity of the neutron flow, the Doctor manages to suck all the Daleks, with the exception of the cult of Scarper, and all the Cybermen back through the breach, as well as the void ship. So they're stuck in the howling dark. Unfortunately, due to various circumstances, Rose nearly gets pulled through into the void. But luckily, Alt Pete is there to save her and take her to his dimension along with Jackie and Mickey and everybody. So everyone is safe, and even Yvonne gets a bit of a redemption arc when she holds off her fellow Cybermen by holding on to a little bit of her humanity and wielding a big gun. So the day is saved, but the Doctor and Rose are separated. Eventually, the Doctor manages to get one last message out to Rose. They say their goodbyes. She admits her feelings for him, but before he gets a chance, the transmission cuts out. Oh, and by the way, they're in Norway, a place called Bad Wolf Bay. Bad Wolf once again. Rose just cannot shake that nickname. Anyway, like I said, the transmission cuts out before the Doctor can say what he wants to say, but his tears say it all. But before he has a chance to leave, some lady dressed in bridal gear shows up and starts loudly asking what's going on and who he is. And all he can say is, "What?" And that's the end of Season 1 of the Tennant era. When next we meet, the most popular season of David Tennant's run, well, second most popular, begins. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, Sarah Jane Smith is always awesome, Rose is awesome, and she'll always be the bad wolf. Never trust the master, and never cross the Jadoon. See you next time.